Folks, we are live. Well, we're back to our normal schedule, I guess you could say. It's a Wednesday night. It's Talking Crit. We're not at TotalCon. I'm not doing a fireside chat. And we have reached down and brought Douglas Cole, Gaming Ballistic. Doug, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You forgot we're also not Zach and Skeeter's Bitches tonight either. So
yeah. Well, God damn it, Zach. Yeah, we're not part of that. Thanks.
No, this is us. We're back to just doing us now. No TotalCon, no GDZ, just us. Just us, buddy. Just us gaming dudes.
So, which means you're going to be back to your general scroll of an episode. Now, for those that don't know, I've known Doug for a number of years. And I knew Doug when Doug was doing video interviews.
That's right.
And the only person I knew at the time, and even now, I think that was transcripts of those. That was the most impressive part of it, if you ask me, because it ain't cheap, it ain't easy. It's often asked for about this podcast, and I wish that you would have a transcript. And that's like, I wish you put this out as a box set on this Kickstarter. It's a unicorn that a few people. Doug, you were one of them, but it is certainly not a bar that most of us can endeavor to attain.
Do we really want transcripts of our shows floating around here, Eric? I'm not saying you or I would want to run for office someday, but I don't know if we need that out there, really. I mean, it could always come back and haunt us.
The thing that I liked about the transcripts is it enables people who can't sit and listen to a podcast for timing or whatever, to go through it at their own pace. And I liked doing it. But it was expensive.
Yes.
A couple $100 per transcript. And eventually as a publisher, I just ran out of time. That being said, I no longer have a day job, so I'm trying to think of other things. And the interview show was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking to the people that I talked to, and not all of them were people whose gaming philosophy meshed with mine, but that's okay, right?
Right.
So it was a lot of fun to hear the different perspectives and to pretend to be a journalist for a little bit.
Well, I've been pretending to be a journalist now for at least a dozen years. It's an interesting thing to dabble your feet into. But you actually were able to tack down some fairly big names in the industry for your interviews. And I still go back every once in a while. It's like, because I'll just be searching YouTube for other stuff. And it's like, oh, and my search on how Gaming Ballistic came. Oh, look at that. Okay. Don't want to look at my interview because God knows that goes back, I don't know, 5, 6 years.
It was a while. Let me look that up. That was fun. That was actually, I remember that time period because I followed up your interview with another one, and I thought that the two of them, if you put them together, they were going to explode.
Who did you follow me up with?
God, I think it was an exciting time. I think it was you and Stacy were going at it.
I almost said that. I almost said that, which is hilarious.
Yes.
But anyway, it was. She gave a really nice interview. She was good to talk to. She was a very good interviewee, as were you. So I was just playing the neutral third party on that one. It was fun because I always send out the questions, but the follow-ups were dynamic, and so that was. Let's look at that. When was that? Get a date.
I'm beginning to feel old.
2014.
Oh my gosh!
2014.
I was still working. Holy crap!
Now, can I post a comment somewhere? Can I link that?
You should be able to put it right into the chat
if you're logged in, because I'm not logged in. I can't put anything in there. Whoa! Maybe he might have tried to log in. I've done this before Eric. If you try to log in while you're online, it will kick your butt. So I wonder if Doug tried to log in. Well, if we're looking for Doug, by the way, so I'm still hitting the Balcones Blue. I got a new bottle. Are you still drinking beerless beer this week?
I am actually, yes. I'm drinking the hop tea.
Oh, the hop tea. Yes, the hop tea.
Hop tea, green one. And actually, Ray says this is better than the other beerless hop.
I may have to try that.
The hop tea stuff.
You seem to enjoy it.
It's good. You know what? It is good. Oh, and as my side dish, I have diet ginger beer. So
you're hitting all the right notes here.
Well, here's the thing. I had COVID shot 1 yesterday.
Oh, so you did finally get it. Oh, that's right. I saw your post. Yes, you got it.
Yes, it was the Pfizer shot. So I go back in 3 weeks. It was Doug has returned. The return.
There he is. I'm not touching the keyboard again, man.
Did you try to log in? Because I've done that before. I've done it.
Yeah.
Same thing, Doug. Yeah, it will kick you if you try to log in while you're already in.
Yeah, it was unhappy with me. So I'm going to not do that. If we want to, I'm going to put that interview link in Tenkar's Tavern.
Yeah,
there you go.
Eric can always link it to Eric's already in. He can link it.
But
so you had your COVID shot.
I got my COVID shot yesterday, and in the afternoon, I was like, I'm feeling a little queasy. I got that background nausea feeling. I was like, this sucks. And the arm where I got the shot, a little sore. I certainly had worse. But today it was queasy. Again, background. Not enough so you don't want to eat, but just enough to be annoying. Upset stomach, gaseous, tired, slight headache. So compared to probably getting COVID, I think I'll take the side effects of the shot. And it's only last
the second shot often has worse side effects, so that may be mild. But everybody's different. I've heard all kinds of stories every which way, so you never know.
Right, and like my parents and Rach both got the Moderna for their first. My parents go back for their second shot tomorrow, so I got the Pfizer. So I go back in 3 weeks. They go back, 4 weeks after their first shot, and because of Pfizer's deal with Israel is basically the petri dish. They get all of the data, and it looks like, at least for as Israel is concerned, the Pfizer shot is as effective in real world situation as it was in a controlled environment. It's hitting the same numbers, so
which is always nice to see, right? Because the having it not just be a lab environment, right? It's it's like the difference between if you play D&D on a completely white square map and there's no terrain and no reality and no craziness, then here's the perfect build or whatever, and this works for
right.
But then it clashes with reality and so. Anyway, obviously it's anything that we can do to get out of the current situation is it's good for the world.
Well, the more people we get, more people that get it, the better off North Texas is going to be in a few months. Because I keep hearing from people every day. I've had the shot. I'm coming. So I think it's making people feel confident enough to be able to get out in crowds. I mean, it's still obviously still masked and still doing social distancing, right, etc. But it does give you a feeling of confidence once you've had both shots that I can actually get out there and mingle a little bit. Because last year we were actively telling people, we don't want you to show up. Don't show up. Especially if you're traveling from out of state or traveling on a plane, don't do that. So we had 68, 80 people that were pretty much just locals, and so now people that aren't locals are saying, oh yeah, I feel confident enough to travel at this point, but by having both shots, I actually feel confident that I'm gonna make my way there. However, I just heard from Levi Combs the other day. Levi Combs is on his way. So nice. He wants to come. Levi's awesome.
Rich and I are, I'd say we're 80% likely that we're going to go. I can only see us not going if suddenly COVID spikes in the springtime, which I don't see happening.
Well, we're going to tell everybody what we told them. The same thing pretty much last year. if you don't want to come, don't come. I mean, and you know how we do registration in North Texas, which is great, is that it just
you can roll it over.
It just rolls over. Very few cons will do that. Gary Con doesn't do that. I mean, very few cons do that, but we roll over. We roll over every year. And so if you don't go, it will be, we keep records, meticulous records. Actually, I don't keep them because it wouldn't be meticulous. Doug keeps them. Doug keeps meticulous records. And so, yes, we were very lucky last year. A lot of people donated their registration fee, which we thought was really nice. And Doug has actually contacted people again this year just to double check and make sure they wanted to donate their registration fee. Because, cool. we're letting you get out of, if you want to keep it for this year, we're going to let you back out of it. But most people are not backing out of it. They say, no, just keep it and we'll pay again, or, we'll figure out something. But yeah, I think this bodes well for, I mean, they're zipping along pretty good. I know the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we've been really hitting the vaccinations pretty well. We had that one blip last week when the weather was awful, but other than that, they're working themselves through quite a bit of vaccinations every week. So I think we're going to be doing okay by June. And
New York City, because you have like some private pharmacies and CVS are doing 65 and older only. Mm-hmm. Then you have city sites, and they're doing everybody, but they're using the Moderna. But now I went to a state site, Aqueduct Racetrack, and they're using Pfizer, and they had National Guard stationed there directing you. But a few things that I was surprised by. Now, I got my immunization. I have multiple comorbidities. I actually took off like 4 boxes, like, yes, congestive heart failure. Yes, 9/11 cancer survivor. Yes, type 2 diabetic. Yes, I'm an overweight fuck. It's like I can check off the boxes.
Right.
And I'm going, I get there and I have like prescriptions in my pocket to show, and I got my phone ready to pull up my data from my hospital with all my hospital records. And I'm asked, so what qualifies you? I go, congestive heart failure. And she's like, writes down congestive heart failure. She's like, okay, step around and see the nurse. I had to show my ID. It was like, that's it? I mean, I could have said I have like anal warts.
I got more, man. I got more than that. Way more. Come on, man.
Eric, you were a police officer, right? I mean, it's like the scene in Untouchables. Why are you carrying a piece? Oh, I'm a treasury officer. Oh, okay. Who would claim this list of comorbidities who didn't have them?
Yeah, right?
No, it's like,
but I mean, like, I was just figuring, all right, you're gonna want some kind of documentation, like,
sure.
Here's my prescription, and Entresto and Brilinta, or here, look at my hospital records real quick if you need to see them on the screen. I'm never supposed to, like, it wasn't even like, put your hands on the Bible and swear that you have the following comorbidities. It's just like, oh yeah, all right, yeah. Step around to the nurse. So that part was kind of like lax, but then with the nurse, she gives me the shot, and then a National Guardsman comes along and gives her next syringe and places it on a table. So in other words, they only get one syringe at a time, so you can't have like your friend come up to the table and like, yo, B, give me a shot in my arm. I need it real quick. I need my vaccine. If you don't even have, you can't risk that. But you can get to the person in the front by just saying, well, what's on the list of comorbidities? I left that list home. Can you give me a hint?
I need to know what to say.
Yeah. Yes. What can I tell you? So I just found that interesting. But if I happen to like belch in the middle of the podcast, you'll know it's my. I'll try to hit the mute button. The cough button on the mic, but there's no guarantees.
Right.
By the way,
you'll drop the F-bomb like it's no tomorrow. But
no.
I
have
a priority straight. I guess my 6-year-old is Captain America from Age of Ultron. Every time I let one go, she's like, language.
There you go. Well, that was. I've told the story of my niece dropping the F-bomb when she was, I don't know, 2.5.
That long?
She knew, yeah, well, she knew like 3 words, like mom, dad, and eat, and then she falls off a swing. And I get the phone call. I'm at work. And I get a phone call from my sister, and I guess this as a parent, whenever referred to as your child, you know the child did something wrong.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like, oh, do you know what your goddaughter did?
My goddaughter. That's
Ooh,
bad.
My goddaughter, she's never been called that since I became the godparent. And she's like, well, she was on the swings in the backyard and she fell off. I'm like, oh, is she okay? Oh, she's okay. But she landed on her knees and she went, ouch, fuck. And I went, huh? She goes, exactly. That's what I said. So I was like, what did you say? She goes, ouch, fuck. That language. She goes, uncle.
It's
fuck.
tough. It's a tough one.
So I realized that Shannon was big into trains. I took her to the Long Island Railroad overpass, like a pedestrian overpass, actually 3 weeks prior. And I was wearing Tevas. It was late spring, nice day. And I scraped my toes on one of the cement stairs. And Uncle went, ouch, fuck. And then said, don't stir. It's not appropriate. Well, you know what? She remembered and she did it in the appropriate fashion.
Like a
sponge. Yeah. She's like, hold on to it for 3 weeks. When you hurt yourself, you go, ouch, fuck. So there, that to me, and she's the one
that's very logical to me, actually.
She is Tenkara when she is online, and she has decided that, you know, when Uncle can no longer podcast or live stream, Tenkara is going to step up, and she role plays this at her home. My mother was so nervous, she's like, did you give her an online account? I go, what are you talking about? I hear her talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and she's Tenkara, and she's giving like a play-by-play. I go, what about? Well, something's wrong. And the phone, she goes, oh no, she's just talking. She's just playing this out. Her laptop, her iPad is off. I'm like, so she's role-playing being my replacement. So she can't wait for me to put one foot in the grave so she can step up. And
I can't wait to work with Tenkara on our weekly podcast. That sounds great. This is gonna be fun.
I would not let her stand behind you on the subway, though.
No, she's a big 10-year-old, but I don't think she has the body mass to move.
Extremely tempting.
Oh wait, she's 10.
Yeah, she's 10.
Oh, okay, yeah, she's my daughter's age. My eldest daughter.
Yeah. So yeah, she's 10. So we actually have something addressed at you, Doug. From Justin, I'm really glad to see GURPS getting some attention. It's a great game that seems marginalized by the community.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, as one of the very few licensed third-party GURPS publishers, powered by GURPS, really. The other being the Amarillo Design Bureau with their Prime Directive stuff. You know, I'm obviously thrilled to be part of it. You know, I think GURPS does get a bad rap. The problem with it is that it's a bit front-loaded. You know, it's like making a GURPS character to start, especially a high-power GURPS character, is a little bit like starting your D&D game at, 10th to 15th level. You got work to do before you play.
Yeah.
And one of them, I don't know, we haven't talked about this here, but Steve Jackson Games is fantastic to work with. I'd say 4, but that's not really true. But yeah, I joked to them. I'm like, I don't have any ballistics in my gaming Ballistic. It's all dungeon fantasy role-playing game stuff. TFT, it's all fantasy. I'd really like to do something, so let me propose a game. And I initially had a different title, and we came around to something else, but called Mission X, which is a standalone role-playing game, like the dungeon fantasy role-playing game. That's my main mission for seeing that work is faster time to the table. If I do nothing else but enable you to get from I'd like to play to I'm playing in 20 or 30 minutes or even less, mission accomplished. And they said, sure, let's do this. And I, that was, we have a verbal agreement and we're working on contracts because COVID sucks. But so it's going to be a standalone game with rules included. Probably 2022 because I got a few other things to do first. But yeah, I think that GURPS gets a bit of a bad rap for being very mathy and intensive and stuff like that. And it's really the front loading that's the hard part about it. And maybe a little bit of too many modifiers oh, I want this plus
Yeah.
one, I want that plus one, and stuff like that. But by and large, I mean, I ran a game at the Steve Jackson Games convention, 13 people at the table playing in my Nordland setting. Half of them had never played GURPS before.
Really?
And I handed them a pre-gen, which is the first step to victory.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, just tell me what you want to do and we'll make it happen. Just remember, it happens 1 second at a time. So don't give me a soliloquy. Keep it focused and we'll make this happen. And it was fast and it was light. And the people who knew the rules engaged in deep rules stuff. Oh, I want to do a deceptive attack to the face and stab him in the eye or whatever. And you know, the other people were like, well, I want to punch him. Okay, you punch him, roll some dice. And as long as you don't start, you know, well, you know, let's find out what the dice are going to tell you, and we'll just wing it. As long as you don't start into that, which is bad game mastering behavior in any game,
Right.
and then you know you're just engaging in, okay, what do you want to do? 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 All right, now the monsters get to go, and you all suck, right? So as long as you're keeping it fast and light, and GURPS is very capable of doing that. Once you get past the Karagen phase, it's a great system, and where it really, really shines, and I just cannot wait to bring this to the table. I still would say that if there's an equal in the modern firearms combat stuff to GURPS, I haven't found it yet, or superior, I should say. There are other games that do different things, but in terms of people who really like shooting things for fun and profit, there's really no better system to play in. And you can do that as what's that? I'm blanking on the thing, but there's a shoot 'em up. I think, you know, all kinds of crazy gymnastics, and I'm flipping around and bend the bullet. So you can do crazy like cinematic whatever, or you can do John Wick.
Right.
And the same author, Hans Christian Bordisch, wrote both books. So you know, it's like it can be malleable to all of that. So I mean, obviously, I've been a fan of GURPS since 1989. You know, I play other games too, and see the merit to those systems. But yeah, GURPS is a game that really ought to get more love than it does.
Well, we have so many. I think one of the things with GURPS is there's so many supplements on so many different subjects, and there's so many different authors. It's really hard just to have a common. You don't get that. It's just, there's so many rules out there. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like second edition D&D when you had all the splat books and all the total book of bards and druids and this and that, and then you had all the second edition books and you had all the extra rule books. The DM had to sit there and tell his players, okay, we're going to use this. We're not using all this stuff.
That's right. It's like the old joke about George Boole ordering from a restaurant menu. Yes, yes, no, no, yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, right? So the thing that I've said about GURPS is that it is a subtractive system. You chisel away at the corpus of rules and supplements and options until your campaign is left. And that is true. It is difficult or time consuming. It's not difficult necessarily. But it makes it difficult to write for, because no two groups have the same assumptions.
Sure, yeah.
And one of the great things about the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game, and even if I pat myself on the back a little, my Viking-inspired Nordland setting, which if you've seen the 5th edition version of that in Dragon Heresy, fine, whatever. But setting out common assumptions for a game is so important, and being able to write from the same rulebook. That's the nice thing about the DFRPG box set, is these are the rules you use. That's it. And the Mission X game will be, these are the rules you use. And if you're going to write for me or write a Mission X supplement, go to that box and write from that box. That's what you need. And it's so nice to be able to do that. And that's frankly where, like Pathfinder's Golarion, which I know is a giant setting, but even though there's lots of different pieces of it, it's a common setting, and so it has advantages in shared assumptions. You know, and as D&D comes forward with the various pieces of its lore refreshed for 5th edition, you get the benefit of shared assumptions, and that is so important to have. I've seen very few games fall apart really because of rules minutia. I've seen game after game after game after game disintegrate because the game master and different players are not coming to the table with the same set of assumptions about what game they're playing. And that's not just a GURPS thing, right? I got kicked out of a game because I was playing the realist in a Call of Cthulhu type game where I'm like, well, no, I'm a military officer. I'm going to follow the chain of command. Why would we go off and investigate the tentacle thing? And they're like, because that's what Call of Cthulhu is all about. And so they're like, yeah, you're not really fitting in here. You're gone. And that was the right call because I wasn't showing up with the right assumptions for that game. And being able to state that no, yeah, I know you're in a military chain of command, and normally you would just report this to your superior officer. That's not what we do here. This is Call of Cthulhu. You investigate the evil things so that you can go insane at the end.
Right. It's the journey that's important, not your destination. It's how you get there, not actually arriving. Now, for me, GURPS. I was first introduced to GURPS with Man to Man and Orc Slayer. And Man to Man was pretty much just the combat version of the rules, and it was digestible. Yes. And then I found 3rd edition GURPS box set and quickly learned that when it comes to GURPS, especially at that time, you could literally endlessly buy interesting supplements for GURPS that will inspire what you want to do. There was stuff like I bought GURPS Fantasy, GURPS Horror, GURPS Discworld, high tech, sci-fi, all these different ones, and it was inspiring. The GM, like, oh man, I got to do a sci-fi horror, and as I wanted to settle down and there's the GURPS Fantasy, Dungeon Fantasy. But as I was trying to get it, I was overwhelmed by the options that I had, and I think that
right. That's right. And the whether you call it analysis paralysis, option overload, or just what is it that you want to do? Eventually you want to sit down at the table, and play. And with all of the different options, it's very possible to have like the car that you're always like the Beaufort says here. It's the car that you're always tuning, and you'll never take it out and drive. And cars were meant to be driven. At least I like cars that were meant to be driven. I'd much rather slide around the corner than just sort of sit there and say, "Ooh, there's my WRX." So yeah, I mean, eventually you need to sit and play, and the amount of stuff that you can do and just keep sculpting that campaign until it's perfect. And this is where the box set type stuff really shines. It lets you get to the table. And that's the important thing about role-playing game is to get to the table and play a role.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and I find myself like taking something like Swords and Wizardry, which, although there's a lot of great options for it, the core rules, you stick with the core rules, and it can inspire you to, and we've seen this. James, Spawn, doing White Star. We've seen others take the Call of Cthulhu aspect to it. There's a lot of different ways you can twist the rules, and it isn't so much the complexity of the rules, but if you have a finite core from the rules, you can take it ways. Sometimes it's just like I said, it's too many. You can have too many options. That being said, again, GURPS 3rd edition, I had a lot, and then must have been about 5 years ago on eBay. Somebody had 20 GURPS 4th edition books. They were asking, I think it was like $100 for. Oh, wow. I was like, that's it. I got to get it. I'll never use it, but I've pulled out GURPS books, source books for, GURPS Horse Clans to inspire me doing stuff for my fantasy campaign that was AD&D at the time, because it was great source material.
Yeah, and
Probably
that's
the best
kind
that
of
was ever out there.
The one thing that I will say, well, I'll say many things, I'm sure. The one source book that I always poke at and say, even if you're not a GURPS person, read this book. GURPS Horror for 4th edition by Ken Hite, the hardback, is amazing. First of all, although no one ever talks about it this way, it is a bestiary. It's full of monsters. There's tons of them in there. But the other thing about it is it goes through kind of what these monsters represent from a narrative or storytelling, or why is it that people are afraid of this creature? What is it based on? And it is a tour de force of storytelling power that even if you don't take that particular vampire or chupacabra or crazy tentacle thing or succubus or whatever, you'll be like, oh, well, for my players, I need to tap into this fear, worry, anxiety, and these are the monsters that will challenge them that way. And it's written by Ken Hite, and that's pretty much all you need to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And folks, if you go back and watch Doug's interviews, Ken Hite is one of the people that he interviewed. Just so it's an excellent interview.
That's a Ken. Interviewing Ken is a great example of the art of shutting the hell up. Ask a question and just let Ken talk.
You gonna say something, Mike?
I was gonna say I always enjoyed the GURPS, like the books like GURPS Japan, GURPS China, GURPS Russia, because it gave you a sense. Because what they try to do is they try to condense the entire history of a nation into one book, which is hard to do. But you hit the high points, and it makes you realize how interesting you should make the history in your own game world. It should be at least as interesting as GURPS Japan or GURPS China or GURPS Russia. You need to have it shows you what incidents happen. I mean, what are the most famous touchstones of those countries? But I always thought just they were really good at giving you examples of how you would write a fictional narrative, also not just a historical narrative.
Yeah, that's right. And it did not appear in print because I couldn't afford it at the time. But I wrote the back history for one of the cultures in my Dragon Heresy game, the totally not Japan and Korea culture, that was based on the real history of Kamakura era Japan. And oh my goodness, if you look at the history of almost any real world place, you're like, if you tried to pull that in a movie, you'd get laughed at.
Nobody believed you. I know.
Unrealistic, right?
Truth
it's like Louisiana.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I just was like, oh, and here's this, and here's this. And then there was a plague, and it depopulated the country, and then it built back up. And then a volcano exploded and flooded the capital in lava, right? And you'd be like, oh, God, and you can either change the volcano to magical catastrophe or not.
Right.
But boy, if you read, I mean, think about the last 50 years in our own history in the United States, right? Or 60 years, right?
Yeah.
I was explaining this to my daughter because she's 11 and she's like, oh, COVID is really horrible and whatever. I was like, kiddo, you got to think of what your life would be like if you were born in 1900 or 1905, right? You've got this huge tragedy of the unsinkable ship goes down when you're 7, or if you were born in 12, right? So in your age now, the Titanic sinks, and then in a couple years you get the worst war that you've ever seen in the history of mankind. But don't worry, we're not done, because not too many years later you get the Great Depression. And then there's World War II, and just when you thought you were safe from that, there's Korea. And that's just the big stuff, right? I mean, around when was the Dust Bowl?
The Dust Bowl was right around the Depression time.
Depression, right? Yeah. So I mean,
yeah.
I mean, and you don't. It gets over. I mean, stuff like that is just overwhelming. And I mean, my daughter has her own perspective because she's 11, But the worst thing that she's seen is COVID, and COVID is not bad, but it's not the Spanish flu, which estimated like half the world got and something like 3 to 10% died of.
Right.
I mean, it was going through the world's population. I mean, I think as many as 50 million of a population measured in 1 or 2 billion. So I mean, it was devastating, and to write that into a source book touches those nerves that can just radically change the society, and it's not even drifting that far from reality. So yeah, I mean, truth is stranger than fiction, because fiction has to make sense.
Right.
Right.
Real life does not have to make sense. Mark CMG, he references the 2E D&D historical green cover campaign source books. Probably the only out of 2E, in retrospect, those are probably the only good things that really came out of 2E, because the complete players handbooks were all shite. But those green book campaign source books were a lot of fun. If you wanted to run a historical campaign or a quasi historical mythical version of the Celts or something like that, they were a lot of inspiration. They were well worth the money. And they didn't feel slapped together, as we discussed elsewhere, Mike and I, that the complete players handbooks were pretty much just crank out a book and get it out there because it's on the schedule. We've already announced it, so don't play test anything. Just get it out there.
Right.
Whereas the other stuff was research. And here's the other thing, too. Well, you got to remember the early Gerp source books and the 2E source books for that. This was pre-internet days, all right? You didn't have Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you were going to use to go find this stuff to make this book. You were getting your ass to a library, multiple libraries maybe, to find this information. You were doing, honest to God, research on these books. So I think that's something to not to be remembered, but to be praised, because you could do a book today if you had the desire to, and you could find the information on the internet, multiple sources. You could quote multiple sources. You'd never have to leave your bedroom as you're on your computer.
And as I recall, the crux of some of the writers' guidelines for current Steve Jackson Games material is, if you can Google it, please don't try and make us pay you for it. Right?
Nice.
Find the stuff that you can't find by typing in, interesting campaign seeds on Google. Matt Rigsby, who's an historian and does a lot of small work, because really that's unfortunately that's what the market supports there. But he does some really neat synthesis of historical places like the Silk Road and whatever, and turns them into digestible nuggets of GURPS material. Actually, that kind of material is almost system neutral. Sure, there's GURP stats,
right?
But like has always been true with GURPS, that kind of thing you read through and you're like, oh well, maybe I'm not doing the Silk Road in the Silk Road, my Earth. But boy, I need a Silk Road-like thing in my campaign world. So there it is.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. When I think I ran GURPS twice for short campaigns, quasi fantasy campaigns, but I would always buy the source books, because especially the source books about real world areas, because the research was done for you, and then stuff that you could port over to your AD&D campaign or whatever. Use it as inspiration for a world and traveler. But somebody else did that research. Again, you couldn't Google it. Like you said, if you can Google it, you got to go deeper nowadays. But back then, you couldn't even listen. If you were lucky enough to have an encyclopedia in your house, more often than not, it was from a prior generation. It's like, well, yeah, we were able to get the Botanica, but yeah, it's from 1962, but it only cost us $40 at the yard sale. All right, but your world ends at 1962, and it's 1985. There's a big gap, and really, and a lot of, and encyclopedias didn't have that focused information, whereas GURPS books always had that focused information. They had an area of the world they were going to focus on, and the work was done for you. So I thought that was well done and great. So now, Doug, I want to step on something here because this came in the mail today. Let's see if my virtual
really
green screen.
Up. Yeah, there we go.
I got to angle it before it kicks me off.
Angle it just right. Dark Lord's Doom. That's right.
Well, you know what? Actually, since Rach is not sitting behind me, all right. So hold on a second. Hold on a second. All right, folks. So there you go. The Tenkar abode. So here we got. I always get that left-right thing confusing here. All right, I'll put it on the cat stand. So now these three. There's another one. Solo books. I was mentioning this before. It comes with. Now I wouldn't cut this out of the book, especially because these pages are double-sided with other pieces of information often on the other side. But I was, most of us have a photocopier at home with your cheap-ass printer. But I swear to God, I want to run the fantasy trip, even if it's just to run my niece through stuff like that. And the amount of token goodness that you include in here for use in your own creations is spot on. And the adventures look like they're solo adventures. They look like they're going to be a lot of fun. I might take the small one and run myself through something this weekend. But post-COVID, I would love to run my niece, maybe Rach, maybe my sister. I mean, she hasn't played D&D since she was 13, and I forced her to play because I had no friends that were playing at the time, really. So it's like, hey, you're playing here. You play a jock from issue 70 of the Dragon or whatever. But, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Vampire Hunter Belladonna, the smaller of the three, is the smallest. Actually, technically, it's not the smallest of the three. The thing about Vampire Hunter Belladonna that you're holding is that Dark Lord's Doom feels heavier because I printed it on heavier paper. But Belladonna's 32 pages, whereas Dark Lord's Doom is 28, but it's on 100-pound paper with 130-pound cover stock, where if you're in Europe, that is 150 GSM paper stock and 350 GSM card stock. So it is. I love the Mixum print. I just go right to the heaviest paper stock and the heaviest. But yeah, Dragon Hunt is very, very hard.
Well, my niece.
I will warn you.
Well, my niece.
Yeah.
My niece loves dragons, and when she saw Swords with Continual Light, she held it up like this and went, "Auntie, this cover sells." She's going to see this and go, "Uncle, when are we playing it? Because this cover sells."
This cover sells. I love it.
Actually, there's a great question from Mark. Why the heavier paper choice? At least to me, if you're getting a hard copy, you're going to be using it, and the tactile feel of good paper. I first really experienced the difference when I was paging through Adventure Conquer King, which was the first book that I really felt that was really printed on heavy paper stock, and it just felt to me like every time I turned the page, it was like being caressed. The tactile feeling of a well put together book when you've got 80, 85, 100-pound paper is just really nice. And so anyway, I just like the heavier paper. I may have to do for some books like my Dragon Heresy book. There we go. This book is 85-pound paper, 128 GSM, 3mm cover boards. I put a lot of this was back before I was trying to make a profit. So this was a vanity book that I wanted to just to be the best of everything, right? Had I done 100-pound paper, which was an option, it would have been a little bit more expensive. But what it would have been is, I mean, it's literally extra pounds, right? It would have been 15 extra pound paper. And so instead of, so if it was that would be about a 20% more. So instead of 3.1 pounds, it would be 3.6 or 3.7. And that gets really heavy. And if you're buying 1,500 of them, it gets really, really heavy. And you start writing very big checks to move them around the planet. But for the smaller books, yeah, you want them to hold up and to withstand. But yeah, this is stuff that especially a solo adventure, you're going to be paging through it. You're flipping pages. I've never done an actual ballistic test on my hardcovers. Maybe I should, but I'd have to go somewhere that would allow me to do that.
Talk to Bill Webb.
Yeah.
Bill has the shooting range on his property, and he's tested some of the Frog God books. So you want to take Bill? Listen, can you see what a 22, a 38, and a 44 do to this book?
But yeah. So anyway, I like. The difference between the heavy paper stock and the lighter paper stock is not that much money at the saddle stitch 48 pages and fewer. It's probably never really that much money. I just like the feel of it. Really, it's what if you're going to buy a hardcover from me, I want it to feel good in your hand, and I think that these books that I sent you,
they feel awesome.
They deliver.
This is again. I got home today, late afternoon, and it's like, hey, there's a package waiting for me there. And I went, oh my God. And I ripped it open. And thankfully, Race didn't say what she usually says, which is more gaming books. because if she did say that, I'll be like, well, technically, yes, but technically, a gift from Doug. And then she couldn't say anything bad. But
I will also note.
What was that, Ray?
Then I can get myself some nice gifts.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfume.
Yeah.
I will also note that for certain games that make choices in their art, where you've got like I have to imagine that Simba Room and a few other of the books where you have a very dark, ink-heavy, full-color print. That a heavier paper stock, a denser paper stock, even if it's not physically thicker, if it's heavier, it keeps the ink on the same darn side of the page, and you don't get bleed through, and that's important for a book where you want your art that you spent so much money on to look good.
Yes, Mark Borg, amazing looking book. I don't know if I would run it, but use it for inspiration, certainly. But now talking about stuff that a lot of our audience probably remembers, the first Goodman Games retro release, was it B1, B2? The paper was thinner than the later releases, and you can see it when you're reading it that it's like a shadow bleed through of the ink from the other side of the page, which you don't get. No, they must have realized what the issue was, and later volumes in the series don't seem to have that same. But it can be an issue. Now, Doug, you have a Kickstarter going right now.
I do. It's called Character Collections for TFT, and what it is a series of. It starts as 3 books. Character Collections 1 is called Experience Adventures. That was kind of a freebie because the last 2 books, The Dragon Hunt and Dark Lord's Doom, was part of a Kickstarter of mine called More Perilous Journeys, 5 books. That one ran a little long. 2020 hit everybody pretty hard, and so that ran late. So I was like, I got to a place and I had some time, and you know what it was? It was this book here, the Sunken Library, which is the 5th of 5 in a TFT adventure series written by Christopher R. Rice and J. Edward Tremlett. I was going through editing and doing the changes that I need because I've developed some very strong opinions on what an adventure that I'm selling to people needs to feel like and look like and read like. We can talk about that later or not as we decide. But as I was reading it, I'm like, all right, well, I need to do this, I need to do this, and in the end, I wrote up mostly stats, and every now and then I put some details, but I wrote up 62 characters. And I was just like, there are so many times in an adventure, many adventures across systems, when it's like, oh, you're attacked by 3D bandits or, 2D6 bandits or something. I was like, wouldn't it be more interesting if those 2D6 bandits were 2D6 individual people and, the Tenkarian is never going to quit, but Michelangelo is going to flee at the first cut. And they're on instead of being, 2D clones of each other, you'll have to forgive me as I write for GURPS and TFT. There's only one D. There's a D6, right? This is the archetype of the D6. This is actually something that I fondle a lot. You'll have to forgive me. This is a cube of tungsten, pure tungsten metal,
Nice.
which is the same density as gold. So when I want to think about how 14 ounces, this little 1-inch cube.
Really?
So when you think about how treasure, and this is why I fondle it, is when you're talking about gold pieces and treasure. Gold is really, really, really spectacularly heavy. And if you've never held tungsten or gold, you don't appreciate what that gold bar is going to do to your back. Anyway, that's another. But anyway, so as I was writing, master of tangents here. I need another martini. But as I was writing, I was like,
we hex scroll, dude. We hex scroll. This is perfect.
So as I was writing this, I'm like, I'm running a little late, and I have an idea. So I wrote down 20 individual characters with all kinds of personality and statted it up, and I called it Character Collections 1. And they ranged from kind of weak to kind of strong. And I sent it out as a PDF, and it took me 48 hours to go from I have an idea to ready to print. It was just boom, 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 boom. And I had some spare art that I used. And I was like, I actually think this is a really good idea. I think that the more that you can have that, right? Reality fiction doesn't have to make sense. Reality doesn't have to make sense. But the more individuality and quirkiness that a game master can put into their game without having to method act their way through it and invent it at the time, the more that you can just grab this and use it, the better. And so I was like, let me come up with some more of these. And so I wrote another book called Rookies, which has 40 characters in it. And then a third one called Bandits and Outlaws, because who doesn't need more Bandits and Outlaws? But you think about it, and you think about, especially as I'm doing this Viking setting, right? Being an outlaw or an outcast, that wasn't just, you broke the law, you were speeding on your horse or something. If you transgress, you could get thrown out of society, right? We were just watching Shogun, and if you got excommunicated by the church, you were done. You were done. You had no place in society. You might not even count as a real person. You could be killed. You could be assaulted. You just weren't a person. You were out. And you can understand how people who fell foul of politics or who fell in a game where the gods walk the earth, if you get kicked out of your pantheon, you're done. You're a non-person. You're dirt. Dirt has more value than you because at least God loves the dirt, right? And so, long story less long, I'm like, I think this would be pretty cool. It's always more fun to have ready-to-go personalities, and so that was the thing. And then the stretch goals are for wizards, merchants and caravans, and then the book that I really want to write at 1,000 backers is Pirates, Raiders, and Outlaws, which is also going to feature 4 ships, a Viking longship because I have to, a 60-foot caravel for either an explorer or a pirate or a merchant ship, and then a lot of pirate fleets, so to speak, were actually very small vessels crewed by 6 to 12 people, and they'd come at you as a small fleet, either from a mothership or from a land base. And so there'll be a couple of those so that you can, and that's going to be the biggest one. That's going to be 72 72 individual characters, so that every person that you're fighting or dealing with is going to be somewhat unique. And where are my cards? So, and then I'm also doing these 3.5 by 5 inch cards with
Right.
the same information, so that you can shuffle the deck and say, oh, you meet 3 people, deal, and they're right there as quick reference, so you're not paging back and forth. And then the art, not this particular art, but like the art that you were showing in the back of the book. Right. So here's.
Yes.
So there are going to be cards and counters for each of these, from my original 5 Perilous Journeys, the sequel for the books that some of you have, the More Perilous Journeys, and then all of the character collections are going to have cards and 2.5 millimeter chipboard counters. And if we get all the stretch goals, which is not out of the question, but it's not the trajectory we're on right now. If we got all the stretch goals, there will be 600 characters.
Wow.
That you can choose from and play from. And one of the comments was, that's not a book, that's a resource, right? That's something that you can go back to over and over and over again.
Definitely. And you gave me a peek on the scenes of the 3 ones that are currently going. And here's the thing. Again, most of the games that I'm going to run right now are Swords and Wizardry, because I can run it with my eyes closed. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I can convert the stats from the fantasy trip easily enough into a Swords and Wizardry equivalent, but you've got the character personalities spelled out enough that I could take it and run with it.
Can I share a screen on this?
Yes, you can. If you get a second, if you get a second monitor hooked up.
I do. Share screen.
Yeah.
Don't show me tips. All right, let's do this. Share. And I'll drag this over here. Oop, no, I'm going to drag it over here. So this is one of these characters. There we go. Right. So Fira is 35 points. Is a couple points past where the starting character is. Gives her a short enough to. This is a fun one, right? So she was a merchant. She had bad luck. She got indentured. Had quite enough of that. Thank you very much. Killed the person who held her indentured contract. And that left her ruthless and determined to never be beholden to another again. She's quite smart, reasonably dexterous. These are on a 3d6 curve, and she's got some abilities. Right, she's good with her bow. Melee weapons 3 is she can shoot farther, so it'd be like having a feat, the equivalent of a 5th edition feat or several.
Right.
For that, that's like the sharpshooter feat. So streetwise. So even without, actually, in a way, for Swords and Wizardry, because there's no mechanics it provides the description. And so she's got a small bow, not too heavy. And unarmed combat 2 means that she's a bit of a martial artist. Right. So she can do a judo throw and stuff like that. So, and she wears cloth armor, which is like gambeson. So it's that padded stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so each of the characters is written up like this. It was funny. I was talking to I was talking to let's see if I can, there we go. Stop sheets. That's quite enough of that. So, but I was talking to somebody on the tavern Discord, and they're like, "Oh, boy, I'm on the fence. Maybe you should do this for Swords and Wizardry." And I think it's still possible. I'm not going to do it in this campaign because I don't like to add things in the middle of the campaign. It's fraught with peril. And it can disrupt things, right? I mean, my focus as I'm doing a Kickstarter is what did I promise, and can I get it into the backers' hands as quickly as possible? My last 2 Kickstarters was not as quickly as I would have liked, and so this one is going to be, the books are almost done. I've got CC3 is done, CC1 is done, and printed actually. CC Rookies. I have 75% of the art in place, and the entire book is written. So these PDFs are going to be in the backers' hands probably the day the check settles, so to speak, within within days. of the Kickstarter ending, the PDFs will be in people's hands for at least CC1. I actually think we're going to pass the 500 backer stretch goal. We passed the 350 backer stretch goal today. And so I think 500 is very doable. You showing me art? Let me see your art. Come on. All right, here we go. Budding artist right there. This is a study in shading.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there we go. All right. This is my 11-year-old Shannon.
My niece's name is Shannon. She's 10.
Says his niece's name is Shannon. It's a good name.
Yeah. And I'm sure yours doesn't drop the F-bomb and blame it on
she dropped an F-bomb the other day when my freezing cold hand touched her belly, and we deemed that the cause was sufficient. Anyway, so the characters are all fully every character. So Fira here with the little art is drawn with the padded armor, with her bow, with a tough looking expression. And I literally, because I finished the book, I sent the book with art holes to the artist. So I was like, this is what you are drawing. And they send me a sketch. I'm like, the dagger is missing. You've given them this, but that's not what they have. This is perfect. Oh, whatever, right? So as we went through this, they really learned to read TFT stat blocks. And so they were able to really take the character art seriously. In one case, they're like, oh, I want to do this. I was like, yes, absolutely, we should do that. It's not published yet. So let's do that because it's just too much fun to not do. So there was a lot of that, but yeah. So I mean, I think that it's a good resource. That certainly, you can go in and pledge just for the counters if you just want the art,
Right.
And there are going to be a lot of counters available. But obviously, it's kind of interesting. As you do more and more with the publishing thing, eventually your back catalog gets to the point where if someone comes up and is like, oh gee, I want everything Gaming Ballistic has to offer in TFT, it's $300, $400, $500. There's a lot of stuff out there. But the interesting thing about this particular campaign is a $10 pledge is as valuable to doing stretch goals as a $400 pledge, because they're not based on dollars this time. They're based on backers.
And why did you go that route? Out of curiosity, because you've done a number of Kickstarters.
I had. This is my 10th Kickstarter. All fulfilled, all successful. Wow. I chose to do it this way because the most expensive part of a lot of these Kickstarters is the art, and getting to PDF. People think that the print is expensive, and it's money, but getting to the printable PDF is usually about 75% of the cost of the project, and roughly 60% of that, 50 to 60% of that cost is art. And so what I did was said, look, if I can pay for everything that I want to do by just the PDFs, then at $10 a pop for the 3 PDFs, right. If we unlock 6 books, you get 6 books for $10. But by doing that, everything cascades. Right, so we funded at 5,000 at 350 backers, which we sort of passed, and then now we're at 349 because someone canceled the pledge. So I'm taking that away. No, just kidding. But so we passed that, so that opened up a stretch goal, and so now that's available, and it's available because at that backer count, I absolutely have enough funding to pay for that, and then when we do hard copy or the cards or the counters, I'm not dipping into future to pay for past. So everything once we get to that point is a win. So I'm not going to get to, oh, we've unlocked everything and find out that I've lost money.
Right.
And by doing it by minimum pledge times backers, it also, frankly, it encourages people to get out there and recruit a little bit. Right. So doing your part is really letting your 2 or 3 friends know to come check this out because it's cool. And during the backer kit phase, and that's the other thing, is Kickstarter is somewhat limited in the ability to say, I'm going to pledge $10 for these PDFs, but I want this hard copy, but not. That was the Boolean joke again, right? I want these things, but not these things. And Kickstarter does not really let you do that. I know that they're playing with something that would let you do that. Game on Tabletop lets you do that, where everything that you want is right there as a menu, and you say, oh, here's my pledge, and I want these add-ons, and you choose them dynamically as front of the front page.
Interesting.
It's a cool system that kind of integrates Kickstarter, backer kit, and a post-campaign sales platform in one. It was based in France and mainly caters to Europe, but it's a really neat platform, and it has a lot going for it. But I'm terrified of moving over there because Kickstarter is Kickstarter, right? So if I had the audience that I knew would come with me, or I knew that I could go over there and build a new audience, I would do that. I may actually wind up doing that somewhat for some of my Dragon Heresy stuff, because that's a no lose in a way, because I've already got 1,000 books sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and so as I come out with more expansions later this year, hopefully, that's the kind of thing where, as they do well, I can print them either in the United Kingdom through Mixam, the Netherlands, if they go big, or Latvia. I like to do my printing in Europe. And part of the reason is yay EU, but some of it is just that, the Atlantic Ocean is a lot smaller than the Pacific Ocean, and it takes 2 or 3 weeks less time to get your books from Europe to the US. And those are 2 or 3 weeks that your backer's not waiting for your stuff.
Right.
So and for whatever reason, even though the Netherlands is the Netherlands, some of the printing companies in Scandinavia and the Netherlands and Latvia, they're really good value. Really good prices. They're really surprisingly good prices. And so it's So anyway, long story less long on that one is my Kickstarter is going reasonably well. But the backer based thing is something I wanted to try. And the other thing that allows me to do is I wanted to offer physical copies of everything, but you can't really let physical copies grow. Oh, here's for $10 you get this and a physical copy. Now, if you get the stretch goal, here's like 6 physical books. Well, now you're losing money.
Right.
Right. And so by letting the PDF grow and grow and grow, there's value there. And if people like hard copy, they can get it. If they don't like hard copy, they don't have to get it. And so it allowed me to, first of all, deliver right away, but give the option to people who wanted stuff to have it. But it also prevents the Kickstarter pledge goals from being insanely complex. Right, because you really want to allow people to pick and choose. But if you've got 6 books, 2 or 3 prior projects, because people, I'm still a small timer, right? I mean, my Kickstarters have maxed out at about 620 people. Even the TFT main Kickstarter had about 3,400. So there are thousands of people who have never purchased my stuff that need to. But the thing is if those people are coming, they may be like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know you existed. Let me get your stuff. Well, I have some pledge goals for that, but maybe it's COVID. I can't play online, so I only want the solos. Right? Or that kind of thing. And so, or I only buy settings, I don't buy adventures, whatever. And one of the books called Iron Skull Castle that David Pulver wrote is like a mini setting. Anyway, so long story less long is this let me keep to 4 or 5 pledge levels. And one of the pledge levels, by the way, is new to TFT. Steve Jackson Games, as they always are, have been very good to me. They said, we will reserve you 50 hardcover copies of the TFT in the Labyrinth book. So we have those. We'll reserve those for you, and you can include them. I just have to pay for them but we'll reserve those for you. We'll hold those aside, and so that lets me offer a new to TFT pledge level. So for $100, you get the hardcover rules, the 3 solos so that you can play alone, and the 3 character collection books that I know are available because they're already written. So that's the
Right.
only stretch goal that the only pledge level that comes with hardcover set. That's only available in the U.S. because the books have to come from Texas and me and whatever. But for $100, you get 7 books, rules, hours and hours and hours and hours of solo play, plus characters that you can just throw down and use. Or I don't want to bother making a character. I'll go to the Rookies book and pick that one. So it's a kind of a cool pledge level for people who are interested in a rules light, tactically deep system that honestly is almost the very definition of it's 1980, right? It's almost the very definition of old school play. It was not updated terribly much for the Legacy edition. Which I got to tell you, if you can find one and if you can drop the coin on it, holy crap! Look at this thing. Look at this monster. Right? This is filled with awesome.
It is. I have it, and actually, I had 2. Zach got my second one at TotalCon 2 years ago.
Yep. You know, Eric, I don't want to drop off again, and Beaufriend is right. Could you drop my Kickstarter link in chat?
Yes. Let me grab it now. As I go to grab it, I'm going to ask you something. Because not many people know that you have a hobby outside of gaming, which is tangentially related to gaming, and there are samples of this hobby behind you.
There are.
So yeah, maybe we could get a closer look. And
sure. So one of the things that I do, is I got in as part of the research for the Dragon Heresy game. I got into historical European martial arts, specifically Viking sword and shield fighting. I had never used a shield. You know, I was like, shields really should probably be cooler than +1 or +2 to armor class. And so as it happens, and it is Minnesota, so as it happens, there was what you call a recreation rather than a reenactment that looked at the historical stuff at the time and tries to recreate the martial arts style of the Vikings based on the historical artifacts. And I started making shields. So this one is cut from we had it. The wood was quarter sawn from a 30-year-old tree that my father-in-law had on his poplar, which is one of the woods that was used. It's covered front and back with calf skin and goat hide around the edge. It's got an oak thing, and I make these. It's kind of the stance there. Edge on, not face on, because it's a buckler grip shield, so it rotates. So you hold it out there, and that keeps you from getting skewered and stuff. So here's your kind of your fighting. Right. But anyway, yeah. So I make these, and every now and then, when I get feeling a little crazy, I offer those as a stretch goal. They're very expensive, right? Because they're all hand built. But I'll offer shields as a stretch goal for my a Kickstarter, my Dragon Heresy. I think I one of my Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game campaigns. I think I wound up selling 4 or 5 of my more recent vintage shields in my very first Dragon Heresy campaign. One of the reasons why it has this offset print run is I had a stretch goal. If we got to $16,000, I would do a full offset print run. And we weren't going to make it. We were like, we were close. We were like $15,032 or some crap like that. And 15 minutes, 5 minutes before the campaign ends, a fellow Minnesotan threw down $1,000 for 2 shields.
Jeez.
Wow.
And pushed us over the edge to get the full offset print run. He really wanted an offset print run. I did too, but it was one of those things where I probably lost $20,000 on that project. Because a 288-page full color hardback with a 1,500 copy print run is not cheap. That's a $45,000 type project. And if you look at the Kickstarter, it brought in like 15, 20 grand. But at the time, I didn't care. It was a vanity project, and I wanted a really awesome book, and I had a good R&D job in doing science for disk drives and whatever, and I didn't care. I was willing to invest that money. Now Gaming Ballistic is my business, and so if there's a word for people who spend more than they bring in revenue, and that word is bankrupt, and that's not where I want to be. But I'll tell you what.
That's why Raggy has the right idea, just by only paying in profit. What's his deal? He's only going to pay in profits now. He's not paying upfront artist or.
He's paying royalties.
Royalties only. Yes.
Yes,
and artists have to work on spec, which that's if you know artists, that's no. The only artists who work on specs are the one that they'd like to not eat.
So people who work for me, I actually don't like doing royalties because as a small time guy, I don't have the bandwidth to do the accounting. It's totally selfish. But what I do is when I pay an author, I'll say, okay, I'll pay you whatever cents a word up front. But if we hit 400, 600, 800, 1,000 backers, I multiply your per word rate by a factor. So as the Kickstarter does more and more, I pay more and more, but I pay up front and I pay once.
Right.
And so that's kind of front loading royalties in a way. It's, maybe there will come a time where I'm an established game company with employees and an accounting department, and royalty is the way to go. But I like the one and done. And also in the 90s, you had a long tail. Are you familiar with the El Capitan, the mountain in Yosemite? Right, you kind of go up and then boom, straight down the cliff face.
Right.
That's what the sales curve looks like, at least for me. Steve Jackson Games has said the same thing. You get most of your stuff right away in a Kickstarter or whatever. Maybe there's I missed that. Mm-hmm. And it is rare. I think Frog God might buck this trend because they have such a deep back catalog. But in most cases, you're really not seeing long tail sales anymore. And of course, in the 90s, you could expect a 10 or 15,000 print run, and to sell out of that print run. Now you're lucky if you get 1,000 or 1,500.
You receive about Frog God. We look at you. I think it's 60% of your money is made in the first 2 or 3 days. And then you make another 20% along the way, and then your last 20% is like in the last 2 or 3 days. So really everything's up front.
Right. And what I meant about, sorry, what I was talking about is years, not days.
Oh, in years? Yeah, you make everything. Oh, yeah, you definitely make everything up front. I would. I mean, for instance, Rapid Athlete that came out 2 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. Now that was a Kickstarter. It's $100. It's $100 item though.
Right.
So everybody that bought it during the Kickstarter, it probably sold what it was going to sell then. Right. Yes, we still get a few buyers of the hardcover here and there, but it's $100. You're just not gonna sell it much to somebody that doesn't already have it. Every once in a while, we're this way, like, oh wait, I've never seen this before. I don't have Rapid Athlete. It looks awesome. But yeah, I would have to say I bet our sales in that are one a month, maybe not even that, maybe 1 or 2 a month.
And that's the thing is that that's the market today is that it's kind of one and done, and so what. And I understand the author's position that if you have a runaway hit, they want to participate. What I try and do is I front load it. The other thing that I do is for covers and maps, I buy copyright from my artists. But almost all of my internal art is copyright retained by the artist. So if they do some cool stuff, like all the counters, you might see those again, right? I didn't buy copyright on those. I wanted to fill my books with unique characters, and in order to do that and not go bankrupt, I offered. I mean, they were willing to accept. I said, "How much for this?" And they're like, "Well, what about copyright?" I said, "You absolutely keep copyright. That's part of the plan." And they're like, "Okay, this much." And so this was not me saying I'm going to try and pay you a pittance. I said, "How much do you want?" I reserve the right to say no, obviously, but I don't negotiate with artists on price. That's not me saying this is what you take. I ask them what their time is worth, and I can either afford it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I pay.
A valid way to look at it.
So if I get big, maybe I can hire more expensive artists. I don't know that I could find a better team. Oh my God, I love my guys and girls. I love working with these guys. I don't know that I could find a better team. I could maybe find a bigger team. I could find a more expensive team, but the work that I get from this team of people is spectacular.
I think that's important, especially if you have that rapport going with them and they know generally what you want and what you expect. That's hard to beat, man. And again, you've been doing Kickstarter for years.
4 years,
What was
actually, 4 or 5 years. My first Kickstarter was Dungeon Grappling, which I understand came up recently in a talk with you and Zach.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my first Kickstarter was Dungeon Grappling, grappling rules for D&D that don't suck. That's not a high bar, but I feel like I passed it.
Most certainly.
So that was my first Kickstarter. Met the goals. I think I was looking for $5,000 or $6,000. Met that. I wasn't really looking to. But that one has sold probably 1,000 or 1,200 copies. That's been a steady. So the long tail, right? Need begets, right? Need drives you, and so the need for grappling rules in D&D that are fun to play never goes away, apparently. And so people are like, oh, I heard there's grappling rules that make grappling fun. And so they'll buy it off of, I think that's my one print on demand product at drive-through. I like to order higher quality print and then sell them through me.
Right.
But anyway, so Dungeon Grappling was my first. I did that in like October of 2016, I think. That's the other. There's a Kickstarter lesson for you. Don't launch a freaking Kickstarter during a presidential election. Any presidential election. Dear God in heaven.
It's a huge distraction, and
It is
then again, now last year, not only did you have a presidential election year, but you also had COVID, which I'm sure
double whammy.
Double whammy, and yes, maybe more people in games to escape, but they're playing games online, which kind of changes the dynamics of what they're looking for. So, yes, I have my copy. Yeah. It's a beautiful book.
This is a fun book. This is I will say it's here's though. If I were to do this tomorrow, I would do it slightly differently because I've learned some things. The content would be split by system. I would do a Pathfinder version, a 5e version, and a Swords and Wizardry version because people, for some reason, don't like to pay for content they don't use.
Yeah.
Even though the price of a book that is 3 times longer is going to be significantly less than 3 times, right? Because adding page count, you don't price it per page, right?
Right.
If you want to double the price of a book, you typically need 4 times as many pages. So, for a book like this, anyway, I would do it differently, and just make sure that each book was focused on that system. That leads into some people will say, but I want this for 5e and I have Pathfinder. Why am I paying for the same content twice? All right. Well, you're going to get screwed coming and going, right? You're always going to have somebody who's yelling at you.
Right.
But yeah, I would do it slightly differently. I would make sure that it's focused on the system that you're playing. So that way you're not paging through and you have what you need. I would also, this one is Dungeon Grappling is pretty good in terms of logoria, too much diarrhea of the mouth. It's reasonably terse. It's like the old joke. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I had to write you a long one. So I was pretty good on keeping it tight. Not the least of which is because it started off with like a 1,500 word base from Tim Short's Manor number 8.
That's right.
So it started short, so to speak.
I forgot that's where it had its roots, because for folks that don't know, Tim, Doug, and a few others were a part of the Tavern
team.
Yes,
right.
We went through Joel Block's Castle of the Mad Archmage.
That was fun. I'm laughing because I remember the back and forth between Joe and some of the members about the 15 to 10 degree slopes.
Yes.
Can you push a ballista up a 10-degree slope and stuff like that?
But it was a fun adventure. It was a lot. It was certainly well written, but as a DM, and I've learned in my time since then with VTTs that if certain things, if you can take the time, tweak the maps, white out the room numbers, which I didn't because I really was not a very good DM prepper for VTTs, and take out the things that say like 10-degree slope or or 5-degree slope. Just take it out because man, you're probably like, oh, that's nice graffiti right there on the slope. It's a good warning sign. So a 10-degree slope.
So there's a good example of something that I didn't know at the time that you could do, but I've learned since. That is a great example of where PDF layering is the tool for the job, right? You have there in your PDF, you have a game master layer and a player layer, and so you just turn off the GM layer and you either drag or copy or whatever. The other thing is in some of my books, like Hall of Judgment for the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game, Forest End, I spit out VTT, larger, sort of smaller resolution but physically larger VTT maps, and so that people can drag them over, and I try and make those the player facing ones, although ideally I'd like to layer those too, but I haven't yet. But but there are some things that you can do within the PDF. Even obviously you can't do that on a print file, but you can do those within the PDF that are very valuable for game master extraction.
So now, Doug, I'm going to toss this at you. Again, somebody who's done 10 Kickstarter projects, and there's a learning curve involved in it. And yes, I've criticized or critiqued numerous Kickstarters over the years. What would you say is the lesson that you've learned that you would like to prevent other Kickstarter creators from finding out on their own?
I think the biggest one is well, first of all, in a way, you got to start at the end and work backwards. If you get to the point where you have a great product, let's assume that it's a great product, and you're ready to distribute it physically, and you don't already know almost every mile of where your books are going to go, you are deeply, deeply in trouble. And you really need to understand how the delivery is going to happen. Like, for example, I've got a book, and I'm going to send you a book. And Eric, you know what? You think that this is really cool, and you want to buy this little bookmark that has a really cool thing that lets you keep track and control points for dungeon grappling. This disqualifies you from media mail.
Yeah.
Your cost just went up. Now you can probably see no problem, right? But by the letter of the law, the minute you put a freaking Post-it note on your book, it is no longer media mail, because there is a very specific set of things that you can use those cheap rates for. Also, if you are delivering physical goods outside of the country, you're responsible for VAT, value-added tax. Books are frequently zero rate. They're almost always less than 10%, except for Denmark, which is 25%. But if you are sending stuff out of the country, either your customers are going to get presented with a bill for duties, taxes, and customs, which always makes them happy. The sarcasm comes up, right? Or you've just lost 20% of your margin.
Wow.
So you have to make sure that you account for that in your post-backer in a post-Kickstarter phase. So if you are charging shipping in Kickstarter and you haven't plussed up for taxes and customs and duties, either you better ready to deliver under what's called DAP, delivery at place terms, which is your customer gets a bill, and boy, do they let you know they don't like getting a bill. And why would you like getting a bill, right?
Right.
You know, and sometimes these countries, they're really aggressive about it. We're holding your stuff hostage until you pay us, 13 pounds or however many, Krugerrands or whatever, kroner. But yeah, so you really need to understand how it gets to the customer.
Which is why a lot of Kickstarters have issues, because they don't take any of that in consideration. Like when that's why nobody does box sets anymore, because unless you have only books in that box set, dice, a miniature, a T-shirt, that it's not media mail anymore. Right. And once it's not media mail anymore, if you didn't budget for priority mail or better, you're screwed. You're gonna lose a lot of money.
I think a slipcase full of books still qualifies as media mail. I don't think packaging counts. So if you've got so if the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game is a set with 5 books in it, if I put those into a cardboard slipcase, that I think is still media mail. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is, because it's still packaging. It's equivalent to the cover for the cover. So that's the big one. Is you really need to understand your entire distribution chain. The other is do your math. I've always been a spreadsheet guy. I'm an engineer by training. Do your math. Oh, okay. Here's the thing. So the other thing is you need 3 plans. You need a plan for failure. That's right. You need a plan for success. And you absolutely need a plan for wild, unbelievable, crazy success. Because, and if that plan includes, I'm throwing more stretch goals that I don't know what they are yet at my backers, stop, go back, and start again. Because it's amazing, I'll offer miniatures. Have you ever done injection molding? Do you know how many iterations that you need to do before your molds are right? I used to do this professionally for tooling for disk drives as a manager, and we would always go through 3 or 4 expensive iterations before the mold and the injection molding process produced what you wanted. If you've budgeted for 1 iteration, I'm going to get it right the first time, you're in real trouble. Right. So you really need to understand the process by which your stuff is created. And it's more than just art. It's more than just art and writing. You need to know that you need to really understand the manufacturing process. And if you're and when I say I don't mean to belittle that. The PDF only delivery model has a lot of advantages to it. And if you're starting off with a Kickstarter, and many do this, is they'll say, I'm going to give you a PDF and I'm going to put it up on drive-through, and here's a print-on-demand coupon, for example. I don't like to do that, but that is a personal preference and a choice that I have made. I would rather print the books, get them at my house, and ship them out by hand so that I know exactly what I'm getting and I can control the paper quality and all that stuff. If you don't want to bother with that, there are options, and there are good options to do that. To get that done, but you really need to understand all the stages and where that puts you, and you got to do the math, and you have to understand what goes into a product. What I would advise people is open up a Wizards of the Coast book before you start your project. Go to the title page. Actually, open up several books from different companies. Go to the title page, the credits page, and you're going to see dozens of names. A big company that pays a lot of people put those names in the credits because they paid them to do something really important. And if you haven't thought about distribution or production or art direction or this or that or the other thing, and say, yes, I'm either doing that or I know who will, then plan more. Right? Here, let me grab this, because where's the player's handbook, right? Go right to the core. All right, let's go to the front cover and let's see if I can find it. All right. 2 designers. So we have a design. We have a lead project manager. We've got rules development, 2 people there. 1, 2, 3 writers. 1, 2, 3, 4 editors. Don't edit yourself. You can't. You think you can. You're wrong. And and then just a whole page of illustrators, several art directors, graphic design, cover illustration, and interior illustration are all different things. Play testing, do it. Brand and marketing. If you don't have a marketing plan, you're going to get your grandmother and your free friends. If you have a built-in market somehow, yay. But otherwise, boy, if you don't have a plan to let people know that your stuff is there and you're just relying on your sheer awesomeness, boy, there's an awful lot of awesomeness in the world right now, and it's hard to filter it out. That's actually the problem that I'm struggling with right now is I can somewhat reliably pull in 500 people to make Gaming Ballistic what I do long term and say, yes, I can do this. I probably need between 1,000 and 1,800 people. And now, I mean, I can do the project like I'm doing now at 500 or 600, 700 people. But if I want to do another Dragon Heresy, 288 page hardcover, that's an expensive book. It's not, I mean, printing it is not necessarily a problem. I think if you're printing 1,000 or 1,500 copies, it's $6 or $7 a copy. And then you have to pay to get it across the freaking ocean. But that's the least of your cost. It's like $250 a page because, you got to pay words, you got to pay editing, you got to pay graphic design and layout. And, if you want to have a visually interesting book. That's the other thing. I started off in color. That's probably not an awesome. Color is almost twice as expensive for art as black and white or grayscale. So if you're just dabbling in game publishing, understand that color is expensive, and color printing is very expensive. You can actually find really good, fairly reasonable black and white printing in the United States. I did some printing at Perfection Press, which is in the middle of the country somewhere, and especially once you considered shipping, they were very competitive for a fairly substantial book, which was black and white. So you can do black and white inside the U.S. At any number of relatively good quality, and it's the color printing that's really expensive. So you just got to understand where your costs are, right? And ideally you have a base that will come to you and know you and stuff. I guess is that. I mean, it was a little wandering, but start with the end in mind. Like Sun Tzu says, to win a battle, you must do thousands of calculations beforehand. That kind of thing. Running a Kickstarter should be a lot like, and Joe the lawyer will smile at this. Running a Kickstarter should be a lot like going to trial. If you're ever surprised, you screwed up badly. You want all your surprises to be good.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Ideally, I would have started my Kickstarter on the first day with 400 to 600 people who have already signed up to follow the campaign, who can't wait to jump on board. And then at the end of the campaign, the people who are like, I'll do this at the end when I know what I want to do, will come in and fill that out. And, oh, look, there's my 1,000 backers. And I see the 600 people. And I say, okay, well, that's going to roughly increase by 50 to 60% past that first clunk. And so I know I'm going to make it. And so I'll start writing books. Actually, if I could do that, I would probably just offer the books to start with. Right. So that's the thing. And that's why I did the backer-based planning that I did, is I didn't know if 1,000 people were going to show up to this campaign. And so I said, well, here's the points. I did the math. I have a spreadsheet. I said, what is required to pay for the art, get that done, give myself a little bit of money at the end. But to the point where if I got 1,000 backers at $10 a backer and then had to pay for all the things that I need to do to make the thing, I think I was going to make 10%, right? Make $1,000 and 9,000 goes into art and whatever.
Right.
And there's license, I got to pay Steve Jackson Games their license fee, and Kickstarter takes their, that's the thing is, that's the other thing is, don't forget whatever you think your Kickstarter is going to cost is going to be 10 to 15% more, because Kickstarter takes their 5% and your credit card company takes their 3 to 5%. And then if you do backer kit, that's another 3%, or whatever. And so take whatever it is that you think you need and divide it by 0.8 or so that you have something left over. And if you're going to charge shipping in Kickstarter as opposed to doing a post-campaign phase, you better know what you're doing. International shipping especially is a Charlie Foxtrot right now. It was bad before and it's worse now. I mean, it's bad.
Well, not only that, but my understanding is that shipping is actually adding to the fund raise, so it goes towards stretch goals and other stuff.
Shipping in, I am not a fan of charging shipping in Kickstarter for a lot of reasons. Let's say that I do the authentic Viking Shield combat game, whatever, and for some reason somebody posts this in Norway, and every Norwegian wants a copy of this thing for whatever reason. So yay, right? But I've charged shipping in Kickstarter. Well, I didn't know that every Norwegian wanted a copy of this thing, and it's going to cost me. I was going to print it here or print it wherever, and I would print in China, and now I have 300 copies to U.S. people and 30,000 copies that I have to deliver to Norway or Iceland. Let's go to Iceland instead, although they're both good. So now I have a couple containers of books that I've probably undercharged in Kickstarter because I didn't know my demographic. You don't know. You don't know what country people are pledging from until the end. Kickstarter doesn't reveal that information.
Really?
You don't know. At least I don't know how to know. Maybe you do know, but I don't know. I think I might have to go one by one. But I like if I do a backer report in Kickstarter, I don't think I can get demographics until after the thing closes.
Well, that's bizarre.
Or maybe it's after it funds. Am I wrong?
No, you're probably right, man.
Message, export backer report. Yeah, okay, here's the thing. So export backer report, right? Available when successfully funded. Now, I've passed my funding goal.
But you're not really funded until the project is ended.
Until it closes. So I actually can't know where these currently 349 backers are coming from until it's too late. And if they, the joke, if they, I got more backers. All right, we're back over. Yay. I don't know where they're coming from. And if you get something that's demographically skewed, not screwed, then you'll be screwed. But if you're, so basically, long story less long is one of the reasons I like BackerKit, and one of the reasons that I keep getting tempted to do the game on tabletop model is it allows you to carefully manage each stage. There's a creative stage, and you want to get as close to done as you can afford to get, but don't set yourself up so that if your campaign fails, you're out, right? You're out of your house, or you're getting divorced, or you can't feed your children or whatever, right? So you want to get as far as you can because people like to understand what they're getting and they want to see. Like I'll do the sharing thing again if you don't mind. Let's bring up library. Come on, there it is. I want to show what I usually would send out. There we go. Share screen. There we go. Share. All right, can you guys see that okay? Yeah.
I can.
So this is the kind of thing that I personally like to show for a Kickstarter where I have not done the art yet. So you've got art spaces, right? You say, okay, I understand as a backer, this is my layout. This is the kind of information that's going to be there. This is the voice that it's in, right? Like, I remember reading through some of Glenn Seal's books, who he does my maps and I love him. But I'm looking through it, I'm like, oh yeah, interesting. Oh, he's dropping an F-bomb here, whatever. So he has a very casual language style in his Midderlands book, and I need to know that. And as a backer, I need to know that. So I bought it anyway. I buy lots of his stuff. But if I'm giving this to my 11-year-old and it's sensitive material or something, right? Or the illustration is mimicking, campy cartoon style where the men have big packages and the women have huge cleavage and it's all suggestive and stuff. You need to know. And so anyway, here's a layout example. The pink is interior character art. The yellow is lead-in art, and that turns into this.
Oh, okay. For those that are going to be listening to this, we now have our half-page title page art, and then you have the actual character art that with the different characters, and that runs down
right, but in the Kickstarter, you see that I've done the work, right? What's missing of this Kickstarter? Right. The art, right? So that's what you're funding, right? This is how far I've advanced. Kickstarter sort of used to be pitched a little bit as I have an idea, and you're going to fund me to make that idea happen. And I think it's morphed into effectively, I have an idea, I've done a lot of work, and you're going to fund finishing the idea. And in some cases, it's basically a pre-order, although they hate that word.
Yeah, Eric and I talk about that all the time, about how the last decade, the entire concept behind what gets done and what doesn't get done is, it's totally changed, because you're right. All you got to do is I have a great idea. I need $20,000. Boom. That was it. Now I have a great idea. Here's my artwork. Oh, by the way, I've already finished the project. Here's this, here's that. Nobody is willing to dump money into something that is just a half-assed dream anymore. It's got to have something behind it.
There's a question. Let's talk about that one. Mortal Odin 1 asks the question: where's the industry going? Growing, shrinking, independent publishers and brands? I think it's going to continue to grow, but I also don't see any sign of less fragmentation. The biggest thing that, like, the Steve Jackson Games people will tell you is that one of the problems in the long tail that we talked about earlier is that game stores are continually having to clear out their material to make room for the next week's onslaught of inventory. Here's another 1,000 games that came out in the last week, and you want to make sure that you keep on top of the next Gloomhaven, right? You just can't say, "Oh, I'm going to buy these 30 GURP source books, put them on the shelf, and they'll sell." Because that real estate could be a high value product like this, that's going to turn over until the next fad comes along, and it's so I think that the barriers to entry of games, board games, miniatures with 3D printing, the barriers to entry are lower than ever and will probably continue to get lower. That's not always good, because it's right. It's Darwinian is what it is. Good, bad, forget it. It's not moral. It's not healthy, because it's very hard for even a good product to get noticed, which leads you to the importance of marketing and presence. And the only games that are going to get out there, and we'll see what happens. I'm really hopeful that people will see this and say, "Oh, I didn't know about this Doug Cole guy. He's got some good stuff." And let's be totally mercenary about it. And this is, I love talking about gaming. I love being in the industry. I love this conversation. But I'm trying to run a business here too. And so, I want people to come into my orbit based on saying, "Oh, this is a good guy making good product." And I need that, and I need the visibility. And if you're just out, and this comes to the question of what is your hints for how do you get out there in Kickstarter?
Right.
Well, you need to know stuff. right? I mean, I was fortunate to become friendly with you back in, what did we say? That was 2014, the B team or something like
Yeah.
that. I interviewed you. So my first gaming product was after 4 years of blogging, 2 years of knowing you and doing this kind of interaction. And so I had a bit of a base. I wasn't planning as I was blogging to become a business. I wasn't planning on writing anything. You know, I was just doing what you do, just smaller.
Yeah.
But then when I became a business, it was like, you know, I could say, oh, I have this grappling thing, and people know me and know Peter Del Orto as oh yeah, they've got some martial arts experience, and oh, they've done some rules writing, and Eric is like, yeah, I've played some of this stuff. This is cool, right? And or whatever. And so it gets out there. But if you don't have that base, you are deeply screwed. Right? You're basically it's the Kickstarter equivalent of pixel bitching. Right? Find that one pixel in a game and push it. Right? That's how lucky you got to be, unless you have a plan of how to get to market and let your stuff out there. And unfortunately, what that's going to mean is either you sell your idea to someone who can market it, and I'm not necessarily recommending that, but that's the gateway. Find an influencer who will talk to your stuff, and that's a crapshoot as well. You know, or you got to do what you know, Kevin Crawford basically said. He's like, you know, you better give your stuff away for 5 years or something like that. And I got all uppity. I'm like, well, you know, rah, 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 rah. I'm like, well, you know, I got a 2,000 person mailing list or whatever. No, actually, it wasn't even a mailing list at the time. I was like, oh, I have 2,000 blog followers. Like, my mailing list is 60,000 people. I'm like, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to start taking notes. And you know, he gave me a lot of really painful, direct advice in an email that I probably still have, but will never share. But he wasn't wrong. Let me try that again. He was right. Let's not do the double negative thing. He was right. I was going to lead with Dragon Heresy, 3 volumes, whatever. He's like, that is crazy talk. It is doomed to fail. Don't. I hate to even. He's like, I even hate to stick my nose in there. Don't do it. It's a terrible plan. No one knows you. You're doing a fantasy heartbreaker. I don't think he actually used those words. Now I'm putting words in his mouth. But ultimately, what he's saying is, you have no market presence. No one trusts you to fulfill an 800-page set of 3-volume set, which is what I'd written. And almost certainly, if you try it, you'll fail, and then you'll be known for failure. Don't. And he was absolutely correct in all those things, and that's what led me to pull out Dungeon Grappling out of that book, tweak it for Pathfinder and OSR and Swords and Wizardry, and I had a 328-person Kickstarter that raised $6,000 and paid for that book. What I did not have was 800 pages at $250 a page, or $150 a page, or whatever it was. Call it 200. What I would have needed to simply pay for the book was $160,000 my first time out.
Jesus.
I don't know what I was smoking, but it must have been really good. Right?
I'm glad somebody talked you off that ledge.
That's right. And actually, you know who I can blame for that is Rob Conley. Because he's like, yeah, you should really ask Kevin for advice. And I'm like, okay, sure. You know, I feel like I've got a good handle for business. I was a consultant, and you know, I'm business, whatever. So I said, hey, you know, whatever. And he's like, yeah, this is just a terrible plan, right? This is just bad. And I'm looking at him like, you know, if you're going to ask for advice, you might as well listen to it.
And that's the difference between you and a lot of people, because a lot of people ask for advice, and Eric and I know a lot of them. They ask for advice, and they're like, yeah, I'm still going to do it my way.
Right.
And that's when they usually run into big problems. Right.
And sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're the Steve Jobs or the Bill Gates or the Elon Musk or whatever, and you have the idea, and everybody else is wrong, and you're right, and you're going to show them, and you do. Mostly you don't. Right? There's a reason why you can count those guys on a couple of hands.
Well, we probably don't have a lot of time left. We've been rolling here for a couple hours, but I wanted to ask you something real quick. Are you familiar with what's with the raggy Lamentation of the Flame Princess thing going on, where he basically has come out and said, "I'm not making any money. I need to start my company over. I want to hire 3 good writers, 3 good artists, but I can't pay anything."
That sounds. I'm not.
What's the chance? I mean, I'm just that. Just your opinion of that, because Eric and I were sitting there just scratching our heads, because it kind of goes against all. It's like you were saying, either he's Steve Jobs or this is the worst idea everybody's ever had in the whole history of ever doing game companies.
So to me, that sounds like the definition of a startup, where you've got a half a dozen people, and you're going to get in this together, and he's going to pay you. He's going to pay you in I don't want to say he's going to pay you in exposure, because that's a whole different tangent. But what he's going to do is if he's going to give you a portion of the business, you're partners, and you're going to invest this together. And I love drawing, and I love this project, and it's a passion thing. Then great. If he's saying, you're my employee, if the business prospect is, you're my employee and I'll pay you later, or I'm not going to pay you, or whatever, then that's not cool, right? That's risk sharing, but not reward sharing. If he's basically giving out shares in a new company as a startup, that's a valid business model.
But no, actually,
it's not what I would do.
I need 3 artists. I need 3 authors. I can't pay you up front, but I will split the profits with you.
It's high risk, and this is the role-playing game industry. So this is high risk, low to medium reward. Nobody really, other than, I'm not even sure if Wizards of the Coast gets rich on D&D. Very few people get rich gaming. There's just not. People might get rich video gaming. People might get rich doing other things. But, you look at the total market, total of the TAM, the total available market of the tabletop role-playing games industry is still less than $100 million. It may be less than 65, right? The last time that I saw numbers, it was between those two. That is, and since 60 or 70% of that is owned by WotC, right off the bat, you got a lot of people chomping at that last $40 million or $20 million, whatever, right? So,
right.
So it's I think that that's a lot of risk. If he gets the right people, maybe it's that way. But I'll tell you what, work for me and I'll pay you later is a great way to piss people off if you can't. Oh, I like to buy my love with cash.
Well, and here's the thing with James last summer in the midst of COVID was basically like, listen, put it on for sale, and if I don't, I'm going to say it was like $100,000. Basically, I'm going to default on loans to the Finnish government. So he raised the money, but he still has, and Joe the lawyer will be somebody else who will put the hand up. So he still has a very outstanding Indiegogo for the ref book for Lamentations that has not, fulfilled. And he didn't even, when he was trying to recruit these people to do work up front and get paid later, he didn't even talk about his obligations for a project that raised $40,000 or so. So years ago.
Right.
So
I don't ever want to. I remember at the Texas Renaissance Festival a long time ago, I saw SCA people fighting, and the biggest, baddest guy there fought 2 people, took them apart. But after he beat the first person, the second person came up, and the guy was just the big guy was just standing there, and the guy came up, and the guy was just standing there, and the guy took one step, and the big guy went wham and just slammed him on the top of the head. 1 blow, instant kill. And the guy just looks so angry, the person who just got killed, and he crumples to the ground, because that's what you do in the SCA. And the guy's name, I think his nickname was the Bear, he says, "If I told you once, I told you 100 times, never lead with your head." and that's the thing, is if you let your projects get away from you. That almost happened to me on the last one, More Perilous Journeys. It's the reason why I had 1 Kickstarter in 2020, and all the costs and just that one piece of revenue is because I was not going to start a new project until I had fully delivered the last one. And I did that, and then I transitioned as quickly as I could into character collections. But boy, I don't like to work in arrears ever. It's a terrible thing. Maybe you have to do it, but you just. I feel like I've built good political capital by saying, look, if I tell you I'm going to give you something, you're going to get it, and you're going to know what you're getting, and you're going to know it in head. And if something happens and it's bad, I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to tell you this happened and it's bad, and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. And that's just, you can do other things, but that's how I'm going to do my thing. I think Mortal Odin asked me a question that I want to answer. How is now that my hobby and love is my business, has my enthusiasm changed? I'm an enthusiastic guy to begin with, as you may have noticed. So my enthusiasm for driving the business is very high. I will say that when I say, gee, if I can only get 2 or 3 times as many backers, 1,000 or 1,500, and I seem to be topping out at 500 or 600 at the moment, not having the special sauce to get farther at the moment. You really need to. I can either be depressed and quit, which I don't want to do, or I can just be rational about what the products that I'm going to offer are. I've got a big project ahead of me in the Nordlander bestiary, the bestiary for Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game, and that's going to be a big bet. It's going to be a big bet with a high barrier to entry, and I'm going to need my supporters to step up on that one. And if not, I'll have to do something else. Actually, what will happen is if I can't make the one big book, I will cut it down and make many little books, because you just got to do what you do. And that's the funny thing about this, is that those big books are great, but the small ones really make you money, because right. I mean, it's just people will not pay 4 times as much money for a book with 4 times the page count, and nor necessarily should be. That's just what the pricing curve looks like. But I mean, can you imagine paying the same per page effective cost for a 600-page Pathfinder core rules as if you didn't have that scaling, right? I mean, that wouldn't be a $70 600-page book. It would be a $280 600-page book, right? I just, no one would pay it, even though the work that goes into it and blah, blah, blah. It's just the market won't go there. So it's always better to split up these works into many smaller pieces if you can, in terms of your profitability, in terms of delivering chunks that people can eat, in terms of making chunks that you can afford to do. I mean, can you imagine writing for a year or two and just going and going and going and going and going, and then you get to the Kickstarter phase and it's like, yeah, that value proposition is not there, when you could have potentially. That's why there's the Dragon Heresy introductory set is level 1 through 5. That's all that I could afford to do. And honestly, a lot of the 5th edition play is kind of more fun at level 1 through 5 anyway. But I couldn't afford to do 800 pages of book, so I did 288. So my enthusiasm is still there. You have to be enthusiastic to be the chief everything officer of a business as interesting as this one. But there are days when it's like, wow, is this going to be something that I can make happen? But let's face it, I've declared that I was going to do this as a business like two and a half months ago, right? I decided that I was not really going to land back in science, and I wasn't even sure I wanted to. I love running teams. I love building teams. I love running projects. And those skills, this is not a new diamond-like carbon deposition machine where you're fighting physics. This is a book. I know how to make a book, right? It's everything that you need to do to make a book is knowable. And so, I'm not trying to invent a way to make an atomic layer impermeable so that we can reduce head media spacing. I'm printing stuff, right? I know how to do this. Yay! Hey, how you doing? Come here. Right? So this is something that good project management can handle. And I feel that I can handle it. The question is can I bring enough people so that I can handle it forever?
Right. No, listen, you have the right goal and you're approaching it the right way. And listen, patience and perseverance. I can personally say that everything I've gotten from Doug has been quality, and it's usable. You can't say for other stuff that is certainly popular and may look great. But listen, I love Raggy's earlier releases. His latest releases look amazing. I don't know how usable they are, but they look good on the shelf. But Doug's stuff is stuff that you can actually use.
Yeah, and this is an entirely. Maybe we can come back some other talking crit or something. I've just invited myself back in your show, but that was one of the things that actually was one of the reasons why the More Perilous Journeys project ran a little long in the tooth. Is I'm reading some of these things and I'm like, I think this can be more usable. I think this can be more friendly to the game master, and I think it can enable more agency for the player if it were presented differently. And so I had a vision of how to present the same material that I really leaned in on. And I think the books are better for it, but I've developed opinions, capital O, on what that is. And this is not world shaking. I mean, I'll say these things and most people will listen to me say these things and like, well, duh, right? This is right. But if I'm selling you something, I can't assign you homework. And this is actually right. So the game master can, and I see this. I've seen this in especially new authors when they write stuff. The game master can assign whatever treasure he wants. So like, yeah, no, that's your job. You're the author. You figure it out. It's especially tempting to do that sort of thing in a game like GURPS where it's all open ended. But no, it's as the author, as the publisher. First as the author, then as the publisher, as the gatekeeper to get that word to you. It is my job to make sure that if you're flipping through this adventure live with your group, you never have to say, oh, let's come back next week because I have homework to do. Now, if your players do that to you and they just take a flying leap off the path, that's fine. But again, as an author of something that is not fiction, it's almost always better to present situations, not solutions, right?
That's spot on. And that's like the quote we leave on it, because that really defines the best advice as we're wrapping this up, folks. Again, I've known Doug for years, so I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass, but I'm going to tell you the truth. Doug does excellent work, okay? And he's passionate about what he does. So, if you want the Kickstarter collections for the fantasy trip, again, I've looked at the PDFs for the first 3. I'm already thinking about how I could use this in Swords of Wizardry. So to me, it's a no-brainer. Now I have the fantasy trip. I will probably run that with my niece at some point. I'm definitely going to break it and do a little fun with it. But as a Swords of Wizardry GM, it is inspirational just the character write-ups. I am an improv DM anyway. So I'm always less prep and more resources. And this looks like a good resource.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're very, thank you for joining us. Folks, I will be back with a live stream on Friday with Joe the Lawyer. And again, Saturday with Rick, we discuss gamers' health. And trying to think, I think we're done with the live streams for Design Quest. So they were a lot of fun. But I understand that it was rough on some of my listeners getting as much as 3 hours a day. So I do apologize. Back to a more regular schedule. Again, as we discussed in the beginning, I got my first COVID chat yesterday. We are in the midst of the world of COVID. None of us are medical professionals. Doug is an engineer, which is probably the closest that any of the 3 of us come to science.
Different kind of doctor.
Yes. So we're not telling you what to do beyond using your common sense. You use it to keep your character safe. You didn't throw that fireball into that 10 by 10 room thereby killing the party. Because common sense would have told you there's a backlash, and that fireball will travel down the hallway. All right. Well, if you use that excuse in game, use that excuse to keep yourself and your family, your loved ones, healthy and safe. Be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. Mike and I will be back next week. And we will definitely bring Doug back another time.
Mhm.
I love it. But basically, Mike, just an open secret, but most of our guests have requested to come back. So, I mean, we might be doing something right. I don't know.
That's hard to imagine, but okay, well, I'll go with that.
Not like those people over at the goddamn Exact show. Screw them. We love them. But and screwed by them in one way or another, possibly. But we don't have video to show. But in any case, later, folks. We are out.